and welcome everybody to Formation, Finances, and Federal Taxes for Creators Worldwide. Kind of a mouthful, but an exciting and wonderful topic that we're so glad all of you are here to kind of go along for the ride with us today. Many of you may know me. I'm Isabel. I'm the Beacons Community Manager. I co-host all of our webinar series with our amazing partners who come in and do these webinars with us for creators to learn about all kinds of different topics. And our January theme has been finances and taxes and business formation and all of those things. So this webinar is going to give us an amazing look at all of those topics. Let us know in the chat, say hi, and tell us where you're coming from, just so we get kind of a sense of who's here and where you guys are tuning in from. And I'm so excited and grateful that some amazing team members from the company Doola are here to share their expertise and information with you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arjun and Jiv, and you guys are going to take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction. We are stoked to be here as well. This is the best time of year to start a company, and I don't know about best time to do taxes, but you have to do your taxes. And if you're starting a company, you need to learn how to get your business bank account set up. So we're going to cover all of that and the above today. I am tuning in from New York City. It would be awesome to hear if you could pop in the chat where you are tuning in from. I think we're going to see a global audience, which is really exciting. And don't worry, we're going to cover, as you can see from the title, these topics for creators worldwide, whether you live in the US or you live outside the US. In terms of the agenda for today, we're going to be covering everything you need to know. And again, we only have about an hour, and we are going to save time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please do put them into the Q&A box, and we will cover them at the end. You can ask as you go. We will cover as many as we can. And we're going to fly through a lot of content. The session is recorded. We have slides too, so you can take notes, but you can also just follow along. And I'm super excited to be here today with Jiv, who is a tax expert and CPA at Doola. And today, together, the two of us are going to cover Formation 101. Things like, what's the best state to form in? Should I form an LLC or a C Corp? What about that thing called an S Corp? Can I actually set up a business bank account? What if I'm outside the US? What are the pros and cons to doing that? And we're going to cover, with tactical, actual answers, what are my tax filing obligations? What are my tax filing requirements as well? Now, before we jump in, very brief introduction on Doola. Doola started 3 years ago, and we're blessed to be backed by some of the world's most incredible investors who are believing in us and supportive of us in our mission to help and enable anyone around the world to turn their dream business into their dream idea. And the reason why Doola actually started, and this will, well, I was going to say hopefully resonate, but this isn't a good thing. Many creators might see this image and say, wait a second, that's what I had to go through. And as founders ourselves, we had to navigate cobbling together many different solutions to get a business off the ground, or to actually monetize your passion or monetize being a creator. And we thought, wait a second, what if you could connect the dots and build this business in a box that helps creators, helps founders, helps side hustlers or entrepreneurs, not just start a company, but get your financial stack set up and then keep the business compliant so that you can focus on what you do best while we or Doola handles the rest. And with that, what we're going to cover today, this is a preview of what we're going to tell you. We're going to then share it with you, and then we're going to do a summary. We're going to cover the full timeline of what it's like to actually start a business, set up the financial stack, and keep it compliant, including formation, including banking and finances, and then also taxes. And with that, we're going to do this in Q&A style. So we're going to take questions at the end, but we want to make this very practical. So in the upcoming slides, you're going to see a question and you're going to see an answer. And if it wasn't crystal clear or you still have questions, pop them into the Q&A and we'll cover them at the end. Let's jump in. Very first thing, we're going to jump right into this is, should you form an LLC if you're a content creator? There's over 50 million active content creators out there. In the chat too, I'd love to hear if you could pop in what type of content you create. Are you a creator? Are you a creator and a founder working on a different type of business? So please feel free to chime in, drop that in the chat too. We'd love to take a look. But when a creator starts out, we're optimists, right? Anyone creating content, you have to be a bit of an optimist. Any founder has to be an optimist. And you picture the best case scenario. And what does that best case look like? You're a creator known globally. You have millions of followers. You're having a global impact with one tweet or one video, one piece of content you push out. You're influencing many people. And with that, you are able to build monetization streams, partnerships, product lines, content, and more. However, there is a major downside or thing that can sometimes happen, which is a lawsuit or something going wrong. And no one ever wants that to happen. The truth is, these are low likelihood type events. However, it's possible, and this has happened, where a customer, a partner, a client, an agency, or any third party, if something goes wrong, could file something. And what it comes down to then is without an entity, you miss this thing called limited liability protection. There's no separation between personal and business. And in that case, your personal assets are actually not protected from business assets, meaning they can be seized or annexed in the case of a lawsuit. You are then personally liable. Now, these are things which are tough to navigate because starting a business is hard enough. And especially when you're starting, every single penny matters. Should you start a business? But before you even start a business, do you know what the right type of entity to start is? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And what's the price or the cost of having that peace of mind? And what we're going to do today is really help you understand and break down, okay, if you think it is the right time to actually start a business, what are the pros and cons? How do you get that liability protection? And how are you going to be covered from a tax perspective too? And we're going to show you how you can actually do this for a pretty affordable price, or again, you can DIY or do it on your own. At the end of the day, the education is the most important thing here. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Jiv to start. And Jiv, let's start with the $1 million question. There's going to be a couple $1 million questions today. But if you are a creator, what kind of business makes sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, the answer, and also hello everyone. I didn't introduce myself, but I'm obviously Jiv Johnson. I'm the CPA at Doola and lead our tax department. We have content creators, internally in-house at Doola. And I've certainly been on enough calls to know that it kind of depends on the creator that you are. If you need to create an LLC or an S corporation, very rarely I'll recommend a C corporation. But here in this chart, you can kind of see the breakdown and differences. There is limited liability between all three of them, C Corp, LLC, and S Corp. However, the taxation I'll get into in a little bit more detail later, but essentially the LLC is pass through, S Corp also a pass through, the C Corp a 21% tax every single year. That's the corporate tax here in the US. At Doola, we charge $297 in state fees for all of those types of entities to create them. And then, it's LLCs are generally best for small business owners. I'd say for content creators specifically, or creators in general, I guess, it's more of a toss up between an S corporation versus an LLC. So really the C Corp in the middle, we won't talk as much about today. And then the only other thing I'd mention is if you are seeking to raise an EVC in the future, you may be able to convert to a C Corp in the future, or you may need to convert to a C Corp in the future, I should say. But aside from that, I think, Arjun, we're probably going to get into the discussion of LLC versus S Corp later on in the slides.
Yep.
There are a lot of different. Oh, sorry.
No,
Do you
go
want
ahead,
me to
go
go
ahead.
through the next few slides too?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different reasons to start a U.S. entity. The obvious one is, I think, some of the reasons that Arjun mentioned earlier is the separation of yourself from your business. As a creator, you never want to risk everything that you do just because of maybe one lawsuit or one mistake or something. I've seen clients that have had LLCs where they are artists and they funnel all of their personal artwork income through it. But also they do events and they do other things. And I've seen them sued and I've seen them lose, their entire business essentially just because, they didn't actually create an LLC or they didn't actually create an S corp, and they just kept operating as a sole proprietorship without actually doing any registration. So the legal reasons are essentially the most important, in my opinion. Tax reasons as well, for tax efficiency, which we'll get on to later here. For foreign founders specifically, I know that this PowerPoint, Arjun, is a little bit tailored for some of our foreign founders, but transacting in USD, I mean, that's pretty much the global currency. Every business will work with you if you have a US registered business for the most part. The financial infrastructure here is great. Having US business allows you to apply for credit. There are banks that are more willing to work with you if you actually have a US EIN. For example, Mercury, which I believe that we'll probably mention later on when we're talking about applying for a bank account, um, and also obviously the prestige, I suppose, that comes with having a U.S. entity. Um, Going back on what I said earlier, again, it gives you quite a bit of like let's see, quite a bit of reliance, I guess, worldwide. You're not going to run into any issues working with suppliers, vendors, or any company that's essentially going to be paying you when you have a U.S. entity. So those are some of the extra reasons. And then the next slide, liability protection, I already talked about. The U.S. bank account I mentioned, and then also just having a U.S. company. It's the U.S. is essentially touching the entire world. Businesses here are global already for the most part, so having your business here kind of opens you up to that market, makes it way easier to have like an actual global hub, if that's the type of business direction you're hoping to go in. And then I think, Arjun, the next slide is the states. Um, this is also a question we get quite a bit. If you live in the U.S., generally it's always a good idea to create in the state that you live in. That's almost always going to be the suggestion. There are a few different situations where maybe it doesn't make as much sense. For example, if you're owning real property in a different state, or let's say that you really have clients only in one state that you service, online, well, then ultimately you should probably create it in the state that you're actually doing business in, if that's the case. Otherwise, always create in the state that you live in. It's way more straightforward, and you don't have to do a foreign registration afterwards. If you don't live in the United States, you can essentially choose any state. The most popular states in general are, oh, actually, the next slide, Arjun is going over it. There are these two states, and really, if you're a foreign owner, hoping to open up a business in the U.S., pretty much all the time we're going to recommend either Wyoming or Delaware. The reasons being, for Delaware, it's if you're creating a corporate entity. Most VC, most VC will pretty much only invest in your corporation or business or startup. If you're actually a Delaware C corp. So that's a major reason for Delaware. Delaware also has probably the longest standing corporate law history in terms of siding with businesses. So again, just kind of emphasizing the importance of liability protection. We recommend Delaware because of all the states, Delaware is probably one of the ones that are most likely, if not the one most likely, to kind of give you that protection. Wyoming being the second, Wyoming having a better kind of set of laws for LLCs and limited liability companies, which is why if someone's creating an LLC, we tend to usually almost always recommend Wyoming. Both of them have pretty low annual report fees. Wyoming is only $62. Delaware is only $300. So ultimately, if you're a foreign resident, it's between Wyoming or Delaware. If you're a U.S. resident, it's going to be a more complicated question, but generally it'll be the state that you live in. And then with that, I think, Arjun, if you want to talk about a timeline for us for forming companies.
Yeah, and just to highlight something Jiv said, want to really stress to folks listening, you can start a business if you live inside the U.S. and if you live outside the U.S. So as we go through this presentation, we're going to touch on both aspects for someone who lives in the U.S. versus someone who doesn't live in the U.S. or lives outside the U.S. But that's something which we think is really important to stress because many people, creators, founders, side hustlers, aren't fully aware of that. So to summarize again, if you're raising venture capital, a Delaware C Corp, if you're not raising venture capital and you're forming an LLC, typically, if you live in the U.S., best state to form is the state you live in. And if you live outside the U.S., Wyoming is a pretty popular choice. Now, next up, this is the actual process to form a company. And then we're going to go chronologically. We're going to talk about how to get a bank account. And then we're going to get into taxes. And we saw some tax questions already come in. But to form a company, there's actually 4 steps which people typically loop together or combine. The first is actually getting the company created. That's submitting documents to the state. And to form a company, you're going to need a couple key pieces of information. You have to choose a company name. Make sure it's not taken. You can check on the state's website. Your address, which can be anywhere in the world. Again, you can form whether or not you're inside the US. And then an email address so that we can stay in touch and process the information for an order. That typically takes a week. Now, I say typically because each state is different, and the dependency there is the state processing time. But all in all, from the time you decide, hey, I'd like to actually create an LLC, within a week on average, that process can be done for a couple $100, or again, you can DIY. Next step is getting your EIN, or your employer identification number. This takes 2 days, or it can take several weeks. Now, why is there such a big difference? Unfortunately, if you do not have a US Social Security number, you still can get an EIN, but the IRS requires you to fax a form to the IRS. So we might be about 10 years away from flying cars, but the IRS still requires you to fax in forms to the IRS. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. But don't sweat. Again, remember, if you don't have a social, it just takes a little more time. If you have a social, you can apply online. Now, why do you need the EIN? You need the EIN because it is required to get an EIN to open up your business bank account. We're going to run through how to open up a business bank account next. A critical thing to understand here is that think of your EIN as a social security number for your business. Each US citizen has a social, a business has an EIN. And the EIN is the number used by the government or the IRS to identify your business. You cannot open a business bank account without it. Why open a business bank account? We're going to jump into this. Separating personal from business is critical. It allows you to potentially have tax write-offs. It allows you to better understand and track how your business is doing. And there's benefits from business banking, whether it's perks, rewards, or even added yield or return that you can get from depositing your money there. And then the final step would be a payment processor. Let's say you're doing a brand deal, or you're charging for a course, or someone needs to pay you. You can then set up a payment processor and connect it to your bank account. So next up, I'm going to run through very quickly how to open a US business bank account. And then after that, we're going to pass things back to Jiv to run through taxes and how to stay compliant. But the first thing is to apply for a bank account. I'm going to summarize a few key pieces of information. You're going to need a US company. You're going to need your EIN number. You're going to need your company's official formation documents, which you got back in step 1. And you're going to need government ID. A passport or a US driver's license. If you live outside the US, typically a passport is going to be required. If you live inside the US, a driver's license will suffice. The other thing too is that you need to have some sort of operations in the US. Again, it could be digital, it could be online, but some sort of existing or planned operations where you're serving or targeting US customers. The next thing here to call out, and again, I want to stress this for the 4th time or maybe 5th time, is you can open a bank account from outside the US, but there are certain countries where you are unable to. This list is not created by Doola, it's not created by me. These are a list of countries which on a federal level, due to national sanctions or requirements or restrictions, you are unable to open a bank account if you live in one of these countries. So if you used to live in one of these countries or are a passport holder, but you now live in a different country, you're able to open. So flashing the list of countries here, unfortunately, if you live in one of these countries, due to restrictions or regulations, you cannot open a business bank account, but you can get an LLC. But it's one thing that folks should be aware of is that you will be running into issues on the business banking side if you live in one of these countries. And for the 6th time, I'm going to keep repeating this, you can apply and open a bank account if you live outside the US. You can do it remotely. You can also do that for a business as well. The final thing here that I want to stress is that there are certain types of companies that have issues when opening a business bank account. The main ones are, and I'll read them out, adult entertainment, cannabis, or internet gambling, as well as money services businesses. Again, a lot of these restrictions are actually determined by the bank or on a federal level. So if you are creating content or if you are creating a business within one of these verticals, just be aware that most banks will have a restriction against working with these types of businesses. That's something that we proactively like to warn or give people a heads up on. Okay, so that was a crash course on business banking. Next up, we're going to hit a very meaty topic, but a very critical topic, which is, Jiv, what about taxes? What do creators need to know about staying compliant and filing taxes with the IRS?
Yep, I'll take over again. It's just a few slides, but they are going to be a little bit. I'll talk for a little bit, but I'll save enough time, I think, for questions at the end. I know that earlier I kind of emphasized that really you're kind of deciding between an S corporation or an LLC when you are a creator, right? So the things to consider when you're deciding on what kind of entity to kind of create. Ultimately, if you're a tax resident of the United States, you're actually paying taxes here, you live here physically. Um, uh, Generally, if you're making above a certain threshold of income, I would say $40,000, $50,000 a year in income. It usually, if you have the money to do so, makes sense to kind of create an S corporation. An S corporation is similar to an LLC, except an S corporation, you can actually deduct ultimately the salary that you pay yourself. The salary that you pay yourself for as an LLC, I guess I'd say, is not deductible normally. The difference in taxation, it can be really, really large, I'd say, for some business owners. So ultimately, an S corporation tends to be more beneficial for U.S. residents. Usually if you deduct your pay, you don't have to pay about half of the self-employment taxes, and then essentially to kind of give you an idea of that, self-employment taxes right now are about, you know, 13%. So ultimately, half of that 13%, if you're an S corporation, you're saving each year, generally because you're paying yourself as an employee rather than an owner. So that's just the one thing I would emphasize there for U.S. business owners. Generally, I do tend to recommend an S corporation. But if you're making less than that or you're pre-revenue, then I tend to recommend an LLC. Um, if you are a non-resident, does your country have a tax treaty with the United States? So generally, an LLC is most beneficial for non-residents who are making active income in the United States, meaning they have some sort of physical presence here. They have taxable income that they owe every year to the IRS. And their country has a tax treaty with the United States. And the reason why is because you won't be paying double taxes if your country has a tax treaty with the United States. If you're an LLC owner and you have physical operations here in the US, maybe you ship physical product that you're making yourself in your country here to customers, that certainly would qualify as taxable here in the U.S. So you want to be able to claim tax treaty benefits for anyone who lives in a country that doesn't have a tax treaty with the United States and you know is making active income through the United States. That's where kind of international tax structuring comes in, and that's where it really kind of hopping on to 30-minute calls with a CPA or a lawyer would really probably be worth it, because nobody wants to pay taxes once in the US and then pay again in your home country. So generally, that's where you kind of need to begin structuring. Um, there are also different things to consider, in terms of how you're generating your income, and this goes back to specifically non-residents. Um, if you're doing something like subscriptions, like through Patreon, Substack, Gumroad, etc., if you're doing online courses or anything that is entirely online service based, um, through essentially just people subscribing to you, a lot of the time that's not going to be taxable here in the United States. It just doesn't cross the threshold to be engaged in a U.S. trade or business. Um, However, if you're sending physical products, well, then that's kind of a different question. And ultimately, that's where you kind of need to consult with a CPA to see, well, does an LLC still make sense for me, or does another corporate entity type tend to make sense? So really, the two main things is just, if you're a tax resident of the United States, generally an S corporation tends to make sense if you're making over $40,000-$50,000 a year. If you're a non-resident, a single member LLC is always the go-to, because chances are you won't have anything to pay here in the US, especially if you're completely online service based. But there are circumstances, like if you have physical products, or if you're visiting the US physically, multiple times a year, where maybe a different kind of entity, like perhaps a C corporation, could make sense. So those are the two main things to consider. I'd say if you're a creator. Um, and then I think for the forms, Arjun, 'cause I think we have quite a few questions here. For United States tax residents, if you're a single member LLC owner, essentially the only thing that you need to prepare, unless you elect to do something different, If you create an LLC, you still prepare the Schedule C similar to how you've been doing as a sole proprietor, except now you also have to do an annual report that's due to the state each year, whatever state that you filed in. IRS forms are due at the same time every single year, generally April 15th, same time as your individual return. If you're an S corporation, and this is something that we do at Doola for clients as well. Form 1120S, it's the S corp corporate tax return. Ultimately, it's due an entire month earlier than any other tax forms. It's similar to partnerships in the sense that it has a March 15th due date every single year. For non-residents, if you're a single member LLC, it's going to be the Form 5472 along with the Pro Form 1120, which is what we file for quite a few of our clients. That form 5472, you're not paying any taxes on it. Most of the time, most foreign-based single-member LLC owners usually don't pay any taxes, but they do have an obligation to file Form 5472. Essentially, what the form is it's a related party disclosure. The risk of not filing the form or filing it incorrectly is, well, I think we have a slide actually coming up after this that kind of goes into more detail on it. But it's a pretty big fine. It's $25,000. We have seen clients before that have received it if they've forgotten to file one. So it is extraordinarily rare to get penalized for this. But you can still be penalized 25 grand simply for not filing this tiny form. Not that tiny of a form, but this one form that ultimately has no taxes owed on it. So that's just one thing I would remember if you're a foreign owner that ends up owning a single member LLC in the United States. You almost always have to file this form every year. It's due April 15th. If you don't do it, you risk $25,000. So please don't risk not filing it. Reach out to someone to kind of file it for you, which is, again, what we offer here at Doola. The only other thing I'd mention is just C corporations. If that ever ends up making sense in your situation, they are also due on April 15th, the Form 1120. So I think with that being said, I'll be talking a lot more again when we get to the questions. So I'm going to pass it back to Arjun to talk through what's remaining here.
Sweet. Thank you, Jiv. And final things here is we're going to go through how you can actually get started if you are interested. But then I'm glad we have ample time saved here because we got some great questions coming into the Q&A. So we want to absolutely save time and jump through there. But let's say you are listening and you're like, hey, you know what? I've been putting this off, or I actually better understand what needs to happen now. And again, as Jiv mentioned, and we think this is important to stress, you can DIY a lot of these things. But if you do make certain mistakes on certain forums, or you're busy as a business owner, not only does it take time, but it can be stressful. And some of these mistakes take time to unwind as well, which is why our business exists, so that we can help creators, founders do what they do best while we handle the very unsexy yet critical paperwork that needs to happen, whether it's formation or compliance. Now, Doola actually helps you set up a company for $297. And in terms of what we actually do there, we create the company. You get a virtual address. So any mail that's sent there from the IRS or the state is scanned and uploaded. You'll get your operating agreement. We'll actually apply for your EIN for you. You get a registered agent, which is required in all 50 states in the US, and we'll actually help you through a few of our partners open that US business bank account. So back to that slide with all the information you need, we help with that. So if you're looking to just get started, get a company off the ground, an LLC, Doola can help with that. The process, and we ran through these steps, but just as a refresher, is you choose a state, you got to pick a name. We're then going to file those documents with the state. We're going to help you create that operating agreement via a template, and we're going to get your EIN for you. Those are that first initial set of steps, and then after that, you can get the bank account. In terms of how we compare to other alternatives, folks can absolutely do their research as you should. One thing which we like to caveat and call out is that you will see many options out there that say it's $0 plus state fees to form a company. The truth is, if you really go through and add up each of the things that are required to, again, get a business bank account, the boxes start to add up and the dollars start to add up too. We've taken a different approach where instead of saying $0 plus state fees, we have our fixed price at the end, plus state fees. Of course, there's some fees that go to the state. So that's one thing. As you do your research, just be careful and make sure, am I getting a company? Am I getting an EIN? Am I getting a registered agent? Or am I going to have to get those things and pay additional or extra costs at the end? The other thing we do, and there's a reason why we talked about tax today, is when we started the business, we realized there's many ways to just form a company. But what about everything tax and compliance? I'm going to have to figure something out for that. Are you going to help me do it, or are you going to tell me who to go to? And that's when we thought and realized, wait a second, what if we could also help creators or founders, not only with their taxes, but with ongoing support as well? And what that led us to is, let's create this business in a box. Let's actually not just form a company and feel like a creator or founder has been thrown to the wolves to fend for themselves, but actually help you with a CPA consultation and help you with tax filings, keeping your business compliant and assisting in getting that business bank account set up. And we can help your business stay compliant. We have a package called Total Compliance. It's either $300 per month or $2,000 per year. And it includes all of those filings that Jiv ran through. You actually don't even have to worry about the filings. It's out of sight, out of mind, but you have trust and confidence that Doola can take care of it. You'll get a dedicated account manager. You'll get a CPA consultation. Your annual filings are covered. Your registered agent is covered. The goal of this package is quite literally so that you don't have to stress about compliance. You can focus on creating, which is very hard to do on its own. Now, the other thing I'm going to stress again is quite literally you can do it yourself for many of these things. But some of you have probably tried to maybe keep your books in order, or maybe you've tried to do some of these filings, or you've tried to start a company. And look, on their own, each of these things maybe isn't the biggest pain, but when you string them together in terms of the cost, in terms of dollars that stack up, and the cost in terms of your time, which is the single most valuable asset, if you can have a trusted partner that can take care of it for you, that is why thousands of founders have trusted Doola to not just start their business, but keep it compliant too. And we've seen this from founders around the world. This is something we love to stress, is that I think we saw some folks from outside the US. Whether you're in the US or outside the US, this is accessible to you. That's part of our goal, is actually to democratize access to this tool, to these tools, and the ability to actually start a US business and make dollars from anywhere in the world. And the final thing here, this was a tweet that we actually saw yesterday, which was a late addition to the slides, but this was from Casey Jones, who said, "It hurts my soul when I see entrepreneurs who haven't gotten their own LLC, such a small step that leads to so much potential." And here's the thing. It is not required to actually start an LLC to start a business or start creating content. But I hope you saw today some of the protections you get in terms of liability protection, some of the benefits you get in terms of business banking and perks, and then also the professional aspect. You're no longer a freelancer, you're an actual business. You can maybe have a better sense of closing brand deals. Maybe it builds your confidence as a creator too. And understanding you have the education at hand, you have the right tools in your pocket, and you feel equipped to go forward is the single most important thing. And the other thing that we try to do at Doola is, for everything we don't do, because we can't do everything, we like to partner with best-in-class companies. So I see a company called Beacons at the top there. There's other companies here which, if you need tools outside the stack for anything from email to phones to affiliate partnership software, we want to be able to work with best-in-class companies to help you at every step of the way. And you'll have access to your documents via a dashboard. Mail is scanned and uploaded there. Think of this as the cockpit of the airplane for your business. And the final thing here before we jump into Q&A is that there are some great questions we're going to run through. But if you have any questions after this, we actually have an offer for the folks listening. You're going to get a free consultation. So you're going to have access to that. There's no strings attached here. There's no gotcha. You don't have to pay anything for this consultation, but you can schedule a free business consultation with our team. And we're going to offer an exclusive, this is just to this community, $100 off our total compliance plan. So you can scan the QR code, or when you're on a call, you can let us know that you watched this webinar. But we want to make it as easy as possible for folks to, again, get the education. If you feel like you didn't have your question answered, or you want to talk about your specific use case, you can schedule a free business consultation, and then hopefully make it a little easier for you to get that business off the ground. So with that, thank you so much for the time. We will jump right into Q&A. I see there's a lot of questions there. Isabel, should we just start from the top and work our way down?
Yeah, I'll pull the ones that are actually being asked live by creators who are here with us first. So we're going to prioritize you guys. And then I had some that were submitted previously. So those folks may not have joined us, but they're going to watch the replay. Thank you for all of that amazing information. The lead-in from your tweet about the LLCs that you just saw, I think is great jumping off point to this first question, which is at what point would you suggest a creator make an LLC? How do you know if you're ready?
Jiv, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I'll go first. The answer is it's different for everyone, but ultimately, with how easy it is to create an LLC, there's really no reason not to kind of create one as soon as you're even about ready to start business, or even the moment that like you're beginning to get serious about it. For example, I created my LLC, I think years ago. Um, when I got my first payment, I think I write on the side. So when I got my first payment through a 1099, related to my writing, I was like, I want all of this to just be through a legal entity. It was just easier to think about, just having all of your income in one thing, and knowing that all of this income goes here and is kind of separated from you individually. So I would say like earlier the better. It's really just a one-time fee to create an LLC. Well, not a one-time fee, but a one-time fee to create it, and then the annual report filing each year, which is relatively minimal if depending on the state you get in. Not sure what your thoughts are, Arjun, but I always say earlier is better for an LLC.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is I like thinking of it as this concept of asymmetric downside versus upside. And look, like most businesses are not going to face a lawsuit, or these things just won't happen. But for the cost, which again can be several $100s, regardless of who you use, and the protection you get, the validation it gives you, the confidence it gives, and to me, it's the price of just sleeping a little better at night, knowing, hey, personal is separate from business. I get a business bank account. To me, I think, again, when you are ready, and what does ready mean here? If you're serious about this thing, maybe you are about to get your first dollar, or maybe you're well past serious and first dollar. And maybe you're actually making a lot of money now and you're listening to this, and better late than never. In that case, like maybe you do have things going to your personal bank account. It's still not too late there. So whatever bucket you're in there, I would just stress, look, like if you are thinking about starting a business or becoming a creator, you do not need the LLC to do that. You actually just need to press post right online and do the thing, ship the thing. But if you're past that point, given all the benefits and the downside protection you get, then I think there are the pros outweigh the cons there. So yeah, to whoever asked this question, if you want to actually just comment in the chat with where you are, we can give a bit more tailored answer there. But I think the answer is the earlier the better. But this doesn't stop you from clicking post or actually starting the business, writing the business plan, or creating the website.
Amazing. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, Michaeli, had another question as well, which is, as someone who didn't have an LLC yet, how do I file my business taxes?
Yeah. So essentially, even if you don't have an LLC yet, you're certainly allowed to go ahead and kind of report it as a sole proprietorship. You don't have the legal protection, obviously, and if the IRS were to ever kind of question it, certainly not having a registered entity would kind of give more doubts to them if this is a real business versus a hobby. So you always do want to have an LLC there, but technically you're allowed to go ahead and report it as a sole proprietorship. Ultimately, whoops, I think I just exited out. You're allowed to report it as a sole proprietorship on your Schedule C. So it's just revenue minus expenses, and it goes right into your individual, AGI. So you would still prepare a Schedule C. You just wouldn't have an EIN attached to it, or any of the legal protections of filing as an LLC.
Cool. This is my question, piggybacking off of that. Is it true that if you have an LLC and a business bank account, you can get a business credit card?
Arjun, you're set up to
Yeah, okay.
answer that.
The answer here is it depends. Now, here's where the it depends comes in. You're gonna have to apply to get a business credit card. You don't, the same way actually, and this is I think worth stressing too from business banking, you have to apply. We ran through the company types that are restricted. If you're adult entertainment, money service business, cannabis, or adult entertainment, you're not going to be able to open the business bank account because banks typically restrict you there. So if you apply with a business that's not in those types, you have your documents, your EIN, the address, there's little reason to believe that you won't get the business bank account. Now, this was a long-winded way of saying for credit, it's similar. You're going to have to submit information on your company, what type of business you are, and eventually the person offering credit is going to take a look at your business and say, how risky is this business? Do we think that they're going to be able to pay us back for the credit line that we're supplying? So it is true you can apply, and you'll actually need to have some of this information to apply, but it's not guaranteed that you get a credit line. Now, the other thing too I'll call out is that it's much more difficult for non-US founders or creators to get US credit. It's not impossible. There's a couple options that we're aware of, but it's much more difficult. If you live in the US, you can walk into a bank branch account and you can apply. There's more options there. So to answer that question, yes, it is possible to get business credit, but remember you have to apply. And candidly, I think the less risky your business is, or the more you validated it with revenue or customers, the better chance you have. But that doesn't mean that should stop you from applying.
Cool. Thank you. I was just asking because those Delta business credit cards have much better rewards. So if you're on the fence about an LLC and you're looking for credit card rewards, that might be a point to tip the balance in favor of LLC formation. Lila wants to know, is showing a bank account transaction for business expenses enough in case I lose the receipt or if I didn't get one?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a question we get a lot, especially for obvious reasons, like no one really wants to keep track of every single receipt that they spend on, for example, meals or small items for their business, etc. There are kind of two answers here. Ultimately, to file your taxes as a CPA, I tend to rely on bank statements. Every now and then we will ask for receipts if something looks weird, or invoices if something looks weird. But generally, a receipt, or not a receipt, but a bank statement shows, a few of the things that the IRS cares most about, which is when did the expense occur, what was it for, and proof that you actually paid money for it. So to file your taxes in general, a CPA is probably going to be fine with bank statements. Some more strict CPAs, or if they see something weird on your business income statement, they may drill down and ask for more receipts, and certainly we do the same if we see anything weird. But essentially, that's for filing your taxes. The IRS, if they were to ever audit you, either randomly or a targeted audit, ultimately they have a lot more rights in terms of what they can ask for. So if you were audited by the IRS, technically they can ask for every invoice related to revenue that you've made. Any kind of cash deposits, they would expect that you could have an idea of how to break it down into different transactions. So that's the revenue portion. For the receipts portion and expenses portion, there's been a lot of arguments in the past about it, especially in tax court. Ultimately, what is the standing kind of regulation right now, I guess, is ultimately if an expense is just smaller than $75, or something very minuscule, like maybe you picked up meal with a client, or maybe you just went to the store to buy office paper or something like that. So any small transaction that's under $75, that is an expense. The IRS doesn't expect you to have a receipt for it. They won't necessarily discount an expense just because you don't have a receipt for something under $75, or a receipt for like a small meal at a restaurant during the day. For larger expenses, especially those over $75, or even those in the thousands of dollars, they would expect when they come in an audit to see a receipt that is itemized, and you should be able to tell exactly what it's for, who the other party was, and also the amount and date that it was paid for. So it's easier now because a lot of places give out electronic receipts, but a receipt also isn't like this fundamental official document. A receipt could be emails between two parties, kind of clarifying how much they're going to pay each other. As long as I can see when it was paid, which you can see on the bank statement, and then kind of make sense out of what it was for, which I could probably get from reading emails between two parties. Well, technically, all of that together, that kind of fits the standard for what the IRS expects, right? So it doesn't even have to be an official receipt, just as long as you can tell who it was from or who was paid, what it was for, when you paid it, and then how much you paid. That's pretty much what the IRS is concerned with. And again, it doesn't have to be an official document. And again, anything under $75, they're not going to discount just because you lost a receipt for it. Although if you had like every single expense that you've ever had is under $75, and you have a lot, they would probably drill down on that. So just to, because I've actually seen that happen before. Someone tried to do that. So don't do that, and you should be good.
Cool. We are starting to see a little bit of drop off here as we get close to the top of the hour. So if we could just rapid fire like one sentence answer through the rest of these to make sure everybody gets their question addressed. What counts as a business expense for creators? Is equipment one example?
Yeah, it's really just a self-explanatory answer. A one sentence answer. This is gonna be like a two-sentence answer, really fast. One is a self-explanatory test, like, is this something I need to run my business? That's the first standard. So, for example, if you're a creator, obviously buying a microphone, and if you're doing videos, yeah, obviously that's kind of something you need to run your business. The next kind of rule is just, is it ordinary for your industry? And basically the rule is, if other people that are creators would probably call it an expense, it's most likely going to be an expense. And that's actually sort of the general rule with the IRS. So compare yourself to your peers, essentially. Ask very common sense questions, I'd say.
Perfect. Katya wants to know, do I need to have a US bank account if I form an LLC, or can I use my European bank account?
You could, I guess I would need to ask, or want to ask a follow-up question. If you're not required to have a US business bank account, but you wouldn't be able to use a US payment processor like Stripe, for example, to deposit payments. And sometimes what we see are US companies, let's say you're doing a brand deal or a partnership with someone, they'll actually want to send money to a US business bank account via ACH or wire. So there isn't a restriction. Of course, a bank could send an international wire, but that's a good question there. I would just want to clarify, are you looking to get a US payment processor like Stripe? If so, you will need a US business bank account. And it comes down to the customers or vendors you're working with and if they require or want that US bank account or not.
Perfect. Another question from Katya. Do I have to declare taxes on affiliate marketing income?
So, okay. So the answer is yes. In general, I mean, if you're a US citizen, the answer is going to be yes. Affiliate marketing can get pretty complicated in the different ways that people are paid out from affiliate marketing. Certainly in some circumstances, I've seen it be more akin to a royalty, right? And royalties, if you're a foreign resident, can certainly sometimes, be taxable depending on kind of the characterization of what the income is. So I would say absolutely include it in your income if you're a US resident. If you're a non-resident, I highly recommend scheduling a free consultation, and so that I can kind of get a better idea of your actual affiliate marketing contract. Only because I've seen so many people come in and each contract is so different. It's really kind of hard to give a straight answer.
Great, thank you. Michaela said when I send it, she meant a W-9 to a company, because that's what we make, let creators generate W-9s on Beacons to send to companies. Why do I do that? What am I expecting them to send back?
Yeah, if you send a W-9 to a company, or if you're a foreign resident, or if you're a foreign owner, a W-8, generally for the W-9 folks specifically, you can expect either nothing if they paid you less than $600. If they paid you more than $600 during the year, you can expect a 1099 from them, and it should get to you, before February 1st of each year. So the 1099 is kind of what you would use to verify how much income you've actually made from that specific, customer or vendor, right? So that's that's what you would kind of use the W-9 for. If you're a W-8, generally you can expect to not receive anything because you're usually a foreign contractor.
Cool. This was Julietta in the chat who said, is it the same percentage of taxes that you pay for an S Corp or an LLC? And I just pasted it in the question box so I could pop it up here.
Okay. Yeah, the answer is it depends. So in general, if the difference in tax savings, which it's much easier to imagine it this way because I could go into the specifics of it depends on your individual income tax rate, which it does, because that's how you're ultimately being taxed on, all of your income, just what your actual individual income is. But the real savings between an LLC versus an S corp, it's that deduction you get for paying yourself a salary that you don't get to do as an LLC that you do get to do as an S corporation. So the easiest way to imagine it is if you made $100,000 during the year, you would pay in self-employment taxes around $13.5 thousand if you were an LLC. However, if you were an S corporation, you would only pay $7,500. So it's really easy to see the difference in dollar amounts, but it's really just a percentage, right? It's that 7.5 or 6.5%. So that's really the difference between the two, S corp versus an LLC.
Great. Is it too late to register a business for my 2023 taxes, or do I have to file as a sole proprietor?
I would say that it's definitely late for 2023 taxes. You can definitely register a business right now and kind of get 2024 off to start with your business starting in 2024. But it is kind of too late to qualify as a business for the tax year 2023 if you haven't done anything towards it.
Related, sort of, how do taxes work if you established your LLC part way through last year?
So if you established your LLC halfway through last year, you get up to $5,000 of startup expenses that you're allowed to deduct from all of that stuff that happened before you kind of officially started your business. So $5,000 of startup expenses, $5,000 also of organizational expenses. Say organizational expenses like money you spend to create your company, or also even to kind of pay a lawyer to create it, or pay someone like Doola, for example, to create the company. Um, and then after that, all of the expenses would just be funneled through the LLC like normal throughout the year.
Excellent. So I was an S Corp for the entire year of 2023, but I never set up payroll to pay myself monthly. Can I pay myself a lump sum now and have that be tax deductible for 2023? This came in before the event, so I'm not sure if
The answer is no. I would have said yes if it was 2023 still. You probably could have actually done a lump sum, and I actually have advised a few clients at Doola that actually had to do that for last year. And you can certainly, it doesn't have to be a regularly occurring salary. Every month. Some people really do pay themselves only once or twice a year. But since it's 2024, tax year's already ended, you can't claim a deduction since it's being paid out in 2024. But you could claim it for this year. Yeah.
Another sketchy timing question. What if I purchased home office furniture in years prior to starting the business, like a standing desk in 2021, but my business wasn't started for 2023? Is that an expense?
Let's see. Home office deduction question. I highly recommend using the free consultation, and we can go into details about how we would calculate the home office deduction for you, because I would ask too many questions. I would have to ask too many questions to give you an answer.
Okay, great. Are self-employed people required to pay taxes in quarterly installments?
In general, yes. I'm trying to think of the exact rule. Self-employed individuals are required to file taxes annually, but you're required to pay estimated taxes quarterly. So essentially, what a lot of people do is, they just kind of estimate out their taxes for the whole year using Q1 or Q2, and then that's how they pay the remainder of the year. If your net earnings were less than $400, though, you don't need to do anything if you made less than $400 in income.
Good to know.
Mhm.
What if you spend more in expenses than what you make in 1099 income? A relatable problem. Does that happen? In Q4 you made 3K, but your expenses were more than 3K.
Yeah, they offset each other, dollar for dollar. The 1099 income, and I'm going to assume that this person, is creating an LLC. So like, it would go onto your Schedule C. You make $10,000 or $3,000 of 1099 income. Let's say you had $3,000 of expenses related to, I don't know, just everything involving your business. They would offset each other dollar for dollar, so you would end up having $0 of income getting factored into, your individual taxes.
Perfect. This question, a follow-up from something you said during the call. Was it accurate that if you make money from selling memberships, digital products, and courses, that's not taxable?
Oh, okay. Thanks for bringing this up. I guess so. What I mean is, generally sales taxable, and also, so sales taxable is what I mean in general here.
Mm,
Digital products in a lot of states aren't taxable. Courses aren't taxable in a lot of states, especially if they're not downloadable. So digital products kind of depend more on, who has the ownership of it. Each state is different for sales tax. For non-residents, if it comes off to be more of an online service rather than an online product, that means that you likely have no, effectively connected income in the US, and you'll probably not have to pay any income taxes in the US. So really that comment was more for non-residents, but it also applies to sales tax. If you do make income as a US citizen, you should absolutely be reporting the income because you're a US citizen. Yeah.
I knew that was too good to be true.
Yeah, it was too good to be true. It was just for non-residents.
Great. Another follow-up question clarifying, Julietta says, you mentioned earlier that S Corp is recommended if the business is making 40K, or was it 50K? What's the threshold?
There really isn't a hard threshold, I would say. I just kind of give it a range. Some people recommend 60, $70,000, and the reason being is that an S corp just one is takes a little bit more time to set up. You have to set up payroll as well, so you have to pay for payroll each month now. So really, it's just more of a comment of at what point does it make sense to kind of go through the hassles of compliances and filing a full S corp tax return. For a lot of people, it tends to be around like $50,000, $60,000 or more, because then you also have the money to kind of pay for a payroll provider, pay for a CPA or accountant as well that can kind of inform you on exactly how much to pay yourself. So that's, I would say realistically, it's closer to 50 grand, 60 grand area, but there is no hard threshold.
Great. Okay. Our last question just came in from Lila in the chat. Do online community memberships count as a service or a product?
Online community membership, so that is a question I've surprisingly gotten a lot, and again, it depends. So use the free consultation because I will ask you a bunch of questions to figure out the answer to your question.
Amazing. And
That's what I would recommend.
the last question that I saved for the end that I'm going to answer is, how do you find an accountant who is well-versed in the creator industry? You're looking at one, and I recommend that you contact Doola to work with Jiv. And, if you're looking for an accountant who's well-versed in the creator industry, I think you guys have proved today with all of your amazing answers to these questions that is you guys. So thank you so much for your time. We are right at the top of the hour here, so amazing that we hit that and we squeezed it all in. It was a really information-packed hour. If you're still here in the chat, drop some claps or some thumbs ups for Arjun and Jiv, and thank you for being here. We were so excited to partner with Doola on this. Make sure you reach out to them for your consultation, and watch out for the replay if you want to go back and rewatch anything or revisit any answers to these questions. And we will sign off for now and catch you guys at our next webinar sometime in February. Details to come.